You're listening to Wise Women with Daisy Khan, where faith rolls up its sleeves as a force for good, and where women define the future with wisdom and wonder. I'm Daisy Khan, author, speaker, and a Muslim woman who spent her life wrestling with a messy, miraculous collision of faith and real life. And kindly subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Welcome to a special episode of Wise Women. I'm your host, Daisy Khan, and today I'm breaking from my usual format because something is happening in New York that demands our attention. So I've been watching this campaign of Zohran Mamdani, the winner of New York's mayoral race for Democratic primary, and I'm seeing a very familiar playbook that I know all too well. The same tired, dangerous tropes that have been used against American Muslims for decades are now being weaponized against a candidate who, frankly, won fairly and squarely. And this time, the stakes are higher than ever. But let me just tell you what this is really all about. Whatever you call them, Muslim detractors or Islamophobes, they simply don't want Muslims to integrate into the social, cultural, and political fabric of America. Because a normalized Muslim, one who serves in office, who leads communities and solves everyday problems like housing and transit, is somebody they cannot fear. And fear, ultimately, is their currency. So I'm doing this episode because we have a choice to make as Americans. We can either let fear and bigotry determine who gets to serve in our democracy, or we can finally judge our leaders by their policies, their character, and the vision that they are laying out for their constituents and their communities. So this isn't about one mayor. This is about who we are as a country and who we choose to become. So I've been joined by my stellar intern, Susanna, who's in the other room. And Susanna and I had been working on these tropes of Islamophobia because I do a lot of trainings on this topic. And we're also trying to figure out how we can communicate this to the public. So I want to ask Susanna, what does it feel like to have this whole thing manifest or unfold right in front of your eyes? So welcome, Susanna. And
hi, Dr. Khan.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm really glad to be on the podcast. And so to answer your question, I would say that it's been both interesting, but also deeply disturbing. It's obviously a very different thing to read about Islamophobia and hatred in the abstract, and then versus to see it unfold against a real person. So it's really a shame to see that happening in real time. I think my first question for you would be, I think it would be really great to understand why so many people would go to such great lengths to discredit a Muslim who's on the rise, and why people automatically attack someone's faith or immigration background as opposed to actual policy proposals that they may disagree with. So what's your understanding of this phenomenon?
So as I mentioned, Susanna, that keeping the fear alive of Islam helps the narrative. So this is what's happening here. They need to keep the fear of Islam alive to maintain their narrative that Muslims must be feared. A Muslim mayor focused on rent stabilization and childcare doesn't fit their narrative of the dangerous outsider. So they will try to break him, demonize him, and prevent him from gaining office, not because of his policies, but because his very success threatens their ability to weaken our faith. And when we allow our faith to be used as a disqualifier for public service, we don't just hurt one community, we weaken the very foundation of religious freedom that we take for granted. And when we let Islamophobia go unchallenged, we're saying that some Americans are more American than others.
That's a really good point, and I've definitely seen people on social media call Mamdani un-American, but in my opinion, what's really un-American is not respecting the right to religious freedom, which is enshrined in our Constitution. And so, as someone who's experienced something similar, can you share what it's like to be on the receiving end of these types of attacks?
Well, I can tell you from my own experience because I went through this in 2010 when I was proposing a beautiful community cultural center in Lower Manhattan. And, it's really exhausting to constantly have to prove your loyalty and patriotism, your humanity, your right to exist in the American social and public life. And when I see what's happening to Mamdani, my stomach just turns because I remember the sting that I felt when I received those same accusations, that And then when your own faith is being weaponized against you, the way you are questioned, whether you belong in this country, and telling you to go back to your home where you come from, and being a full citizen, I'm a citizen, taxpayer who's contributing to making this nation as vibrant and as great as it can be, and then you're told, not you, not here, not now. That hurts. That really hurts, Susanna.
Mm-hmm. So, looking at specific Islamophobic tropes, I understand that a lot of them are designed to stoke fear instead of actually informing people. And that's why it's really so important to break them down and educate people, because we don't want people to fall for the harmful fear mongering. So, looking at one of these tropes in particular, there's this idea that a Muslim mayor, Mamdani, would impose Sharia law and even destroy democracy in New York City. And since you've actually faced sort of similar accusations in a different context, how do you feel about this happening again?
Yeah, well, I call this the Sharia hysteria. It's like a game. When someone accuses you of wanting to impose Sharia law, it's like the scariest word in the American vernacular when it comes to Islam. It's like being accused of wanting to force everyone to pray 5 times a day. That's what Sharia means. You fast during the month of Ramadan, and oh, by the way, you have to give 2.5% of your disposable income as tithing. And then also, while you're at it, make Christmas illegal for everybody else. It's so absurd. It's almost comical, but it's so effective. But it does what it's supposed to do. It instills fear in people's minds because people don't know what Sharia is. And so when you say these kinds of things, so for instance, I was always asked by people, and seriously, they would ask me, like, will stoning come to America? And I remember once a woman asking me, like, are we going to have to now wear a burqa? Like every American woman would now be asked to wear a burqa, or that they're going to cut off our hands. The truth is that my faith, Islam, teaches me that there is no compulsion in religion. And a Muslim is supposed to live by the law of the land. And, it's really crazy because I, who've spent all my life building bridges between faiths, I've fought for women's rights in places like Afghanistan. And then all of a sudden, I would tear down the Constitution that I signed up for when I took an oath to get my citizenship in the United States. It's absurd, but that's what they're doing to Mamdani. But, here he is, a millennial who speaks multiple languages. We've all seen videos of him, speaking in Bengali one day and Spanish in another day. And he's building coalitions across faiths and across races. And he's focusing on those things that his constituents and his followers want. They want affordable housing. They want affordable childcare. They want to be able to live in the city. And yet he's painted as some religious extremist. So it's just a playbook, right? Used against me and Muslim leaders or any other Muslim who tries to break through the glass ceiling. In other words, you Muslims are not supposed to aspire to something greater. You just stay in your place and be the second level. Don't try to emerge as being leaders. And that's what's it all about.
Okay, so being on social media a lot, and particularly Instagram, I've noticed that under a lot of Mamdani's Instagram posts or any other social media posts, there's a lot of references to 9/11 and other claims that Islam is inherently violent and that therefore a Muslim mayor would be dangerous. How do you respond when people try to connect you or other Muslims to terrorism simply because of your faith?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the terrorism card is really the cruelest card. I mean, because it works backwards from our identity, meaning that the moment you see a Muslim and immediately you are seen as a national security threat. You hear little kids being bullied in school being called a terrorist. And what do they have to do with anything, right? And I remember when I was proposing to build a community center in Lower Manhattan, this was a cultural community center. Someone suggested that the center would be used for bomb making. And I remember it was almost laughable. I felt like I'd been slapped in my face. It hurt so hard because here I was trying to counter extremism. Remember, Susanna, I showed you the book that I wrote called Wise Up. knowledge ends extremism. I wrote an entire book on this. I've been working for peace all my life, for understanding, for everything America claims to stand for. And then those of us who are at the forefront of fighting the big fight and being full American, are reduced to a caricature of violence. It's so un-American to blame an entire group for the actions of a few that I think that that's the message I want most Americans to remember. It's unfair and it's unjust to do that. And when I see comments like this about Mamdani trying to invoke 9/11, I almost want to scream because this guy was just a kid then. From reports I've heard, he was 9 years old. Here's what nobody will tell you. We Muslims also remember. We remember 9/11. I used to work in the towers before 9/11. It was my neighborhood that went down. It was my city that was attacked. It was my country that was attacked. And we mourned. This was our tragedy. We were mourning with everybody else, but we were not allowed to mourn because we were Muslims. We were told, no, not you. It's not your tragedy. Well, it was our tragedy. Guess what? We lost 60 Muslims on that day also. And most people don't know this. And then we watched our entire faith getting scapegoated and being, treated as suspects, and then eventually being surveilled. So I think that Mamdani being told that he's going to bring terror back to America, but this is the guy who's focusing on transit and housing, right, and childcare. And I don't know if you see the irony in this, but this is very insidious, right? They don't need evidence. They just need fear. And that's what it's about.
And so we're also seeing people, and not just random people in Instagram comment sections, but important people with big platforms telling Mamdani to go back to where he came from, or even in some cases calling for his deportation. And so as someone yourself who's been told that you don't belong here sometimes, what does this particular attack mean to you?
Well, when I heard deport Mamdani, these words are like a punch to the gut. It doesn't matter that I've spent decades serving this country. It doesn't matter that I'm a taxpayer. It doesn't matter if I'm called this my home and I'm contributing to the social fabric of America. When they want to silence you, they just remind you that you don't belong here. We've heard this so many times. When a Muslim is walking in the street, they could be born in Texas and they're being told to go home. And so that, I think that kind of attack, they're meant to show you that you're a foreigner and you don't belong in this country. But the truth is, there are 7,000 people there serving in the armed forces, and many have, died in that fight. There are many people who are public servants. But yet, we recently heard a Republican congressman calling for Mamdani to be investigated, right? And here's a sitting member of Congress who wants to strip a democratically elected mayor because he doesn't like his politics. The good news is that the real integration means not stopping and hiding from who you are and start leading. And I think that's what terrifies them about Mamdani, is because he's refusing to back down and he's refusing to hide who he is and refusing to not lead. He's leading.
So there are also these accusations that Mamdani himself is anti-Semitic and even maybe dangerous to Jewish New Yorkers. So as someone who has spent your career building interfaith bridges and fighting all types of faith-based hate, how do you navigate this particular accusation?
And I also know that Jewish communities are, just like Muslim communities and all other communities, do come in many, many stripes and many colors. And so there is not just one community. It's not a monolith community. And I know that for a fact because I engage with many of them. But when people accuse you of anti-Semitism for supporting the rights of Palestinians, which is what this last 2 years has been all about, they're putting you in an impossible situation. Speaking up for international human rights and norms, which are established human rights and norms, and you're labeled a terrorist sympathizer. And I have watched Jewish friends defend me against these accusations, and they were the first ones that came to defend me. And that's what's powerful. And I think the same thing is happening to Mamdani because he's also being defended by many Jewish leaders and his Jewish constituents. But unfortunately, many people's voices get drowned out by fear-mongering, right? The social media accounts that talk about Jews being on trains soon because of Mamdani But that's not protecting the Jewish community. That's people who disagree with Mamdani's proposed policy, spreading fear and weaponizing Jewish trauma to attack a Muslim candidate who they don't want to win. So this is all about dividing people. And they make it seem like caring about Palestinians means hating Jews. That's just not true, because there are many Jews who are also supporting Palestinian rights. Both of us want equal treatment for both of our people, and we want justice, and we want peace to prevail for everyone here in the homeland as well as overseas. And this is what everybody wants. But there are people who want to divide us because they have other political agendas.
Okay, so Mamdani already has a very stressful job. Not only is he an assemblyman, but he's also running for office. Um, but now, unlike the other candidates, he also has to deal with this overwhelming current of Islamophobia and even violent threats against him and his family. So, in your opinion, do you think that Mamdani can weather the storm, or is it just going to be too much?
Yeah. Most of us that get thrown into this have no playbook. I remember when I was under attack, I was writing my own playbook. So the stakes are so high for Mamdani, and he is writing his own playbook. And he's writing his own playbook because he's a millennial and he refuses to hide who he is. And he is saying, here I am, I'm here to serve. And what he will experience will be much worse than anything else that any of us have experienced. And because it breaks my heart, because this is what real integration should look like. You're not assimilating, dissolving, you're not invisible. You're leading, and you're willing to put yourself out there, which is what he's doing. And even though they're busy calling him a terrorist and demanding his deportation, they're completely ignoring, like you said, his actual policies, right? Wouldn't it be refreshing if we could have a real debate about rent stabilization? I don't know, Susanna, if you ever lived in New York City. I lived in New York, and I actually lived in a rent stabilized apartment. I have a lot to say about it. I could explain every little thing about what happens when you're in a rent stabilized apartment. These are middle income people who are trying to survive in the city. Middle income meaning artists, writers, authors, people who don't have, Wall Street salaries, right? Wouldn't it be wonderful to talk about free buses? I don't need a free bus, but who needs a free bus? Wouldn't it be wonderful to talk about childcare? I know nieces and nephews that are complaining that they're paying through their noses for childcare. It would be wonderful to find out, how does he plan to pay for that? Like, has somebody tried that somewhere else? Is there a precedent for it? And where's the funding going to come from all these? And will these policies ever work? Instead, we're stuck arguing about his Muslimness. This is what Islamophobia costs us. It robs us of substantive democracy. And Mamdani has detailed plans for challenges that many New Yorkers face, and his opponents should be challenging those plans, not his right to have them, right? But judge him on his budget proposal, not on his prayer schedule. Debate his housing policy, not his heritage. I think that's where the conversation needs to be, not about what year he came from Uganda and which box did he check off at his Columbia University application. I think the real conversation needs to be about his policies, and let him answer those questions. We're not even giving him a chance to answer those questions.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because obviously the people who are going to be the voters deserve to know about the actual issues, and we want people to be voting for who they actually align with politically on policy, not just, about something completely different and arbitrary.
Yeah. Well, you also want to know if his ideas are pie in the sky ideas, or are they real? Are they implementable? I, for one, Susanna, the work I do, it's all about great ideas, then taking those great ideas and putting them into implementation plans, right?
Yeah.
You need money for this, you need to implement it. Well, is this all implementable? That's the debate I want to have. But we lose all that because the whole conversation is about, he must be this, or he's planning this, or he's insincere, he's faking it all. I mean, I've heard people say all these things, and I'm like, why don't you just debate the policies rather than the person itself?
It's disappointing. The the good conversations that could be happening that we're missing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so you're not just someone who's, gone through these attacks personally, but you're also someone who's a real leader in the Muslim community and who gets to talk to a lot of people in that community. So what would you say to other Muslim Americans who are maybe watching this unfold? And what do you think this particular moment means for that community?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you something. When I was going through the attacks on me, the thing that most people don't realize is the toll it takes on not only the parents, the family, immediate family, friends, allies, because there's so much worry about your safety, right? And a lot of these questions keep many people up at night. And our younger generation is watching this right now. They're watching this play out, and they're getting a real, very clear message about their place in this country, right? I think about young women who have graduated from law school, who may be dreaming of running for city council someday. And is she watching these attacks on Mamdani and saying, why would I put myself through that? And I think about brilliant policy minds in our community who could solve real problems. Are they deciding it's safer to stay in the private sector? What a loss that would be, right? To take people who have some great ideas to then stay in the private sector, remain a doctor or a lawyer, and not venture into politics. Sometimes I wonder, why did Mamdani even choose politics? His mother's a filmmaker, his father's a professor. He could have just gone into filmmaking and made a great career of himself. But here he is serving the public, not earning a huge salary, right? He could be doing so much better if he was on Wall Street. But he has a commitment to something. Do we want to lose people like that? And then this is why everybody's so energized around him, because they see a person with fresh ideas, not the same old stale politics. If people do not allow him people will win without even defeating Mamdani. And so because they make the cost of participation so high that many people will opt out of public life. They will turn our faith into a liability, and people shy away from wanting to be, identified as a Muslim. People would rather stay invisible than lead publicly. And many people begin to think, if they can do this to him, they can do this to any one of us. But here's what I want American Muslims, the younger ones, to really understand, that Mamdani didn't get this far by accident. I know he's only 33 years old, but he got there because enough New Yorkers looked past the fear-mongering and saw a leader. He won because people were tired of the same old politics and wanted someone who understood their issues and their struggles. And that is where you have to keep your eyes on that prize of, what can I do, and am I committed to this work? And then just enter into the public, into the public arena.
Yeah, that's great. So, like we talked about before, you've definitely experienced a lot of the same types of attacks, but obviously Mamdani is running to be the mayor of the largest city in America. So it's very large scale. People all over the country are sort of watching this take place, and, on the internet and stuff, sort of even taking part themselves in these conversations. So what is it that makes this moment different and potentially more dangerous than about 20 years ago?
Yeah, well, that's what you just nailed it. It's different, but it's also dangerous, right? Different in the sense that, when I came into this and I was proposing a community center, and they came for me with all these smears, I was trying to integrate my community into the social and cultural fabric of America. I was giving speeches. It was important work, and no denying it, but it was not a direct threat to any power structure, right? Mamdani's different. He's seeking executive power in America's largest city. And he's proving that Muslims don't just want to integrate, they want to lead, right? And that's why these attacks are so vicious. And it's not just Islamophobia. To me, it feels like political warfare. Because look at how many people have ganged up against him from his own party. And they're using his faith as a disqualifier. They're saying that being Muslim makes you inherently unfit to govern America. These are all the tropes that we spoke about earlier, right? You're unfit to govern because we can't trust you. What does this all mean? I think it means that the signal to Muslims is that you're second-class citizens, and you should just be grateful for tolerance, but never expect full equality. That's the message that is being delivered to Muslims.
Okay, so if you were to deliver your own message to people, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, after our conversation, what would that message be? Is it more hopeful, or do you sort of have a grim view of the stuff that's happening?
Well, I'm always hopeful because always, you should always see the light at the end of the tunnel. And these attacks are very, very vicious, and they're going to get even worse. And they're designed to break him. But they're also a sign that we're threatening the status quo in exactly the right way. They're not attacking Mamdani because he's weak. They're attacking him because he's tapped into something people are yearning for. People are yearning for meaning, for substantial change, not the slogan change. This guy wants real change, right? And that's why he's galvanizing so many people and millennials and younger generation, because they also want to see a change, So to young people watching out there, if you are young Muslims, you might be in Mamdani's shoes one day. And I remember what it was like to have the weight of representing not just yourself, but your entire community. I know that exhaustion of constantly proving you belong, but I also know the power of refusing to let hate define you. I remember when somebody asked me, I think I was on Democracy Now!, they said to me, "Do you fear for your life?" And I didn't even bat an eyelash. And I said, "No, I don't fear for my life. I fear for America." Because I was worried about what this nation was going to become, right? And so this is what we have to remember, that this is our country. Your voice matters. And if you don't let fear silence you, then don't let anybody tell you that some dreams aren't for people like you. You must refuse to do that. You must always chase your dream. You must always go for it. And Mamdani is showing you what's possible when you stop asking permission to exist and start demanding the right to lead. It's not just an inspiring story. It's almost revolutionary.
That's great to hear. Okay, so for the last question, I think it was really good to, sort of go through and talk about all the Islamophobic attacks on Mamdani. They're obviously very relevant given what's going on. But in your opinion, what sort of gets lost when we spend all this time talking about a candidate's faith and identity? Are there things that we should be discussing instead when we're talking about an election, or, is all this stuff just sort of fair game?
Yeah, well, I think this is really a test for all Americans. I mean, the Muslim candidate happens to be Muslim, and the Muslim community is directly impacted by it. But I think that this is a test for all of us as Americans, because Mamdani has detailed all these plans to address problems middle-income New Yorkers face. And, middle-income America is facing similar problems, right? And many people are being driven out of the city because of affordability issues. I'm a classic example of a person that loved the city, that was a New Yorker down to my gut, and I'm still am. But I couldn't have able to afford the city now. And I think his opponents who are on the fence should be challenging those plans. And they should be judging him on his budget proposals. They should be, debating his housing policies and not where he worships. So to me, Mamdani's campaign is not about electing a mayor. It's about whether we finally ready to live up to the promise that is America. And that your faith does not determine your worth, your character and your ideas do. So I don't think we should let anybody steal this moment. Don't let them turn being Muslim into a political death sentence, because the question isn't whether Mamdani is qualified to be a mayor. The question is whether America is ready to be the country it claims to be. So I think the choice is ours. And I have full confidence that Mamdani's constituents are going to come out in full force behind him. And if he just stays on course, he will attract more people, because this is a moment where people want to choose courage, and they want to choose inclusion, and they want to choose a future that is fair for all, and not fall into the trap of fear itself. So I'm hopeful. Let's just say that. Susanna, are you?
Well, that's great to hear.
What do
Yeah,
you think?
I think so. I think that it's very inspiring that there's so many young people that are, really caring about politics. And I think that that was a big question after November of, how do we get young people to care about stuff? How do we get them to turn out and to vote and stuff? And so I think it's good to see that there is a big population of young people who are ready to participate and who do have ideas and don't want to just, see recycled ideas, but do want to be able to participate in that, when they really do care about something and when they see a candidate that they are excited for, that they will turn up. And so I think that that is something that can, teach people in politics, a good lesson of there are these voters who we can't just write off. They're there and they're here to stay
Yeah.
and participate.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to know that there are people that Mamdani is not just attracting Muslims. People think, oh, the Muslim community came out. There are conservative Muslims who would never vote for him. Okay, because they are worried that he's going to tax them. He's attracting people from every sector. Like I said, he's got huge Jewish following, and he's got the millennials, and he's got the younger generation, and he's got liberals who
Yeah.
are New York, and he's got the middle income people.
But there are other candidates who also have, different accusations against them relating to, women and sexual misconduct and stuff like that. And obviously, a lot of your work is also focused on, women specifically. So I think it'll be interesting to see what people end up caring about.
We'll see how it goes, but we can expect a very exciting campaign. He's exciting. He's bringing a level of energy that nobody else is bringing to the table. So, so my dear guests, listeners out there, I just want you to know I'm going to continue this conversation, because I think that we only touched very briefly upon these tropes, and I was giving my own sort of sentiments, but I'd like to take each one of these tropes and flesh them out with you. And thank you, Susanna,
Yeah, thank you for having me.
thank you so much. All right, thanks everybody, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you for joining me on Wise Women. If something stirred in you today, don't let it stop here. Share this episode with someone who needs it. Reflect on what resonated for you, and definitely plant one seed of change, however small. Remember, you do matter, and your actions have a ripple effect. But none of us can rise alone. To explore more resources and ways to get involved, do visit my website, daisycon.com. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, because every click is your way of amplifying this message to others. Wisdom isn't just heard, my friends, it's lived. So let's live it. Until next time, stay wise and stay rooted.